Thank you very much. Then it's great. Let's get it started. I actually gave you right now a quick interview, like overview of what I'm going to talk. So let's move on from that. The fact is, for everyone who is on the call right now on the stream, the fact is that when you're starting an application, so very soon you're needing like some type of architecture or as well as a state management for your application, because the application is growing. You need to manage your estate, and it's very important to have it maybe from like very the beginning. So well, today, what I'm going to talk about is architectural thinking. Like, I will show you how an architect think, and also I'm going to talk about state management in Flutters. We're going to go through some of the packages and some of the patterns, and I will add some architecture characteristic to these packages. And at the end, I will make a decision, and you see how I make a decision for my application. And well, Evgeny introduced me very well. I think I can jump this slide, but if you want to follow me or have any question later, you can always find me on internet with the handler that you see on the screen right now. All right, architectural thinking. Well, architectural thinking is, well, thinking with a purpose. Like, you think how you can tackle a complex issue, or how you can solve a problem, or even how you can make a very difficult decisions. These are all architectural thinking, right? So we get into more details very soon, and I'll convey my message regarding thinking like an architect. Most of the idea that I'm actually talking today in the first part, the theory part, you can find them in Fundamentals of Software Architecture book. So it's a very, very, very nice book. If you have not read this book, or if you have not been like an architect, I'm pretty sure many of us have been kind of like an architect from time to time. You'll see what I mean in a second. But if you want to learn more and go through the fundamentals, I encourage reading this book. But in this book, it was mentioned that there are three important factors that an architect usually is following. And the first one is finding out the trade-off. So as an architect, it is important to understand and analyze and recognize all the trade-off that is associated with the problem and the solution. So it's not like you choose one solution and it works in all scenarios, right? There is always a trade-off. And in fact, when I became an architect in the last years, this is more and more and more apparent to me. Like, I need to think differently. I need to understand, like, when I choose this decision, even in my life, let's say my real life, there will be a consequence. There will be a trade-off. I need to figure out what are the trade-off and then choose the best solution at the time for the problem. Another factor that you need to take into account is the business drive. And I also added here team drive myself, because we're going to talk about the state management, and the team is very important here. So you need to understand the importance of these business or team drives and translate them to the architecture concerns. So in fact, that means we need to talk to business team, or maybe to our developers, and they must understand what we are talking about. We're gonna get to that when I'm talking about the state management. And last one is having a breadth of knowledge while maintaining the depths of a certain level of knowledge. For example, you are very expert on one topic, or maybe many topics, and you're not very expert on some of them. So you need to know the stuff that you don't know. So the more you know the stuff that you don't know, the better later for your making decisions. So let me give you a real example for the trade-off. So a few weeks ago, after 2 years of being home at work, home alone, and because of COVID, and I finally could travel to DroidConf in London, and I was thinking like, after 2 years, I had a refresh, eye and very fresh eye looking at the aircraft, and I was looking at, the wings and the engines, and I was thinking like, why the engines are, whenever I'm seeing most of the aircrafts that I see, the engines are below the wings. And I made a research quickly, and I found that actually there are some airplanes that they have engines on top. Some of them have like embedded to the wings, and we have some engines that are in front of the aircraft, and so on and so forth. So I'm particularly talking about these three types. Well, my question was, as an architect, then which one is better? Then why do we have like most of the time engine below the wings, and sometimes we have them on top of the wings? But probably there must be some trades-off here. So I need to understand. I ran a little bit of research, and I found out that I can categorize, at least I can look at these architectures of the aircrafts in three different ways. Well, there are many of them. I'm not expert in aviation by any means, but I can at least read and understand some of them. One of them was safety. I understood that in many aircrafts, the fuel tank is in the wings, apparently, and, somewhere else that is also connected to wings. And in fact, if the engines are below the wings, it seems like it's much more safer because it's further away from the cabin, it's further away from the, because it's below. And also, it gives much more like a better aerodynamic, maybe. And there is one more fact here, is that because it's below, because of the way that it's architected, so it has less noise apparently. And again, it's because of below the it's because it's below the wing. It gives some kind of extra benefit to the size of the wing, so they can add more engines, or maybe they can have bigger engines. And because it's also closer to the ground, apparently, it doesn't absorb as much dust that it should, and then therefore the maintenance is much more easier. Also, it's reachable by hand. Well, I was reading these and I was realizing like, okay, then why then that's good. Then there must be like, now when I understood this, I said, okay, then perhaps all engines for all aircraft must be below the wings. Then why is not that the case? This is the best solution as I see it, or isn't it? There was other factors, in fact, at that time. So one of the factor is that, well, especially for those engines that are embedded to the wings, it seems like these engines provide like a better aerodynamic. And for those that are on top of the wings, there is a term in aviation called STOL, and that is short takeoff and landing. For those, a situation that you need those short takeoff and landing, that engine on top is much better. So, and also because, for example, the engines that are on top of the wings are further away from the ground, the clearance of the engine is much better. The maintenance cost is also higher. The cost is also lower because it doesn't absorb dust. It's the lifespan of the engine is like longer. But when it's below the engine, below the wings, so it is much more costly because the lifespan is apparently shorter. Now the question was like, then which one is better? So there must be the best here, isn't it? As an architect, usually you will receive two words, and it depends, right? If you need a better, or if you have a situation that you need short takeoff and landing, then perhaps the aircraft must have this engine on top and you need to focus on that. Or in many of the cases that we have normal situation for takeoff and landing, the safety is important, the maintenance is important. Maybe we should have this engine below. So here is how architect thinks. So you need to find out the trades-off. Those were the trades-off of choosing your architecture. Another thing that I mentioned was the technical brief. As I said, you are expert on some of the knowledge. That is perfect. But you need to expand that knowledge. You need to read. You need to study more. You need to understand the stuff that you don't know. And there are a lot of things that you probably don't know. You don't know. That is fine. But the more you know you don't know, you heard about some of the topics, especially regarding what you are doing. This is perfect because it gives you an ability to, at the time that you want to compare and make decision, it gives you an extra security to, compare many more things that might suit you. Let me give you an example. Well, unfortunately, we are virtual, and let's say give it a try. 30 seconds. Who on this stream have heard about triple patterns or segmented state pattern? If you have heard about it, just write something in the chat. I give you 5 seconds. All right. In fact, I asked this question several times in different talks, and many people didn't know about these topics. And here is where the time I said that you need to know the stuff that you don't know. If you just was a little bit curious and was reading the documentation on Flutter dev under state management options, then you could have seen this topic. Or you've been, or if you have been subscribed in any newsletter in Flutter, you perhaps have had a chance to see these topics. That might be a solution for your problem at some point. Here is the breadth of knowledge that I mentioned. But now, let's get into Flutter state management. So the probably most exciting part of the talk, so that you are looking for. First of all, the state is very important because it gets very complex very soon. In Flutter, it's very unopinionated. You can do different ways to handle your state. And it's also very controversial, right? I'm gonna give you my application as an example. I wanted to build an application, MJ Coffee app, for different purposes. And one of them was to show to some of the stakeholders, to business. So this application was simple. We had a couple of screens, maybe 5, 6 screens. We had logging. We had a menu. You could go to each coffees and you can add to cart and maybe submit an order, a profile page, and sign out. So that's very simple application. Initially, when I wanted to think about the state management in this application, so I wanted to architect it. So I said that, okay, let's have the states per screen. All right, then I thought that maybe at some point I'll get a problem. Maybe I should have a state in one place and just sharing across the screens, right? Well, which one is better in this case? How do I know? Well, it's very hard to understand. It really depends what I want to do. When I say it really depends on this. It depends who or which widget you want to share with. So if you have an state that you want to share across all widgets or some of the widgets, well, that is what we call it app state, right? And then if you have maybe state that is just particularly for one widget, then that is what we call it ephemeral state. So the way that you handle a state for an ephemeral state, whether a widget state, that can be different. There is no wrong answer here that you choose two different state management for these purposes. So what we're gonna actually talk today, mostly after this slide, is talking about the app state. The states that you want to share across some or many of these widgets. By looking at the options on Flutter devs, that's naturally, especially newcomers to Flutter will do, right? They go and search a bit and they go on Flutter documentation. They look at the options and they figure out, oh, we have so many options. Which one is the better? The first question is that what is the best state management? Which one is the best for me? How can I choose? You go and probably research a bit more and you will find out a lot of articles and you will find out a lot of questions and some answers. Perfect. Then you will probably come up to this screen, which is created by Mike, one of the member of Flutter community. And you see that now the situation is even worse. You have more than 30 options. So then it's even harder now to decide which one is the best. So some people quickly go and say, okay, the best is maybe the top 3. So I should go for there. That's it, because everyone is talking about it. But is it the best? We'll figure out shortly. This is how I thought as an architect, how I decided to choose one state management package for my application after researching a bit. Okay, I quickly look at these state management and I figure out this chart was perfect for me because it had a lot of information. And I also looked at the repositories, documentation, and I could categorize this state management into 3 different categories. The first one was some of the features, some of the packages are built on top of the Flutter features, like inherited widget and, etc., etc. Some of the packages are built based on reactive programming basis. It utilizes the streams. It comes with, a lot of let's say, a stream-based, implementation, like MobX blocking, Kubernetes, etc. And I figure out some of these packages are also fall into a category that I called functional programming basis. So you have the idea of immutability of the object, like your state, and you have a pure function. You will return always a new object, and etc., and so on and so forth. So, well, this was originally good for me. The reason was at least I had an idea how I can compare. Then I need to maybe, if I don't really know which of these categories is the best for me, what I can do, I can go ahead and choose 1 or 2 that I know probably are better, or at least I could research a bit about it and compare them. So 1 or 2 from each category. That is good. But then I also went a little bit further and said, it's impossible to just quickly compare 30 or even more state management. It's very hard to sit and write code for each of them because you want to choose an state management. It's a lot of options. It takes so much time. So I need to somehow narrow down my list. So I quickly came up with the criteria. I said, okay, let's do this. Let's say I want to use the packages are widely used. At least I'm hearing about them here and there everywhere. Or maybe they have a lot of likes. They are on top of the list. They are very active, or the maintainers are very active. The maintainers have a very good package, And perhaps I need a package that has a very good documentation. One important thing for me was have a package that is covering a code more than 70% in test. So I wanted a very well-tested package. So that was my minimum. And then I said that I want a package that does only one thing. I want a package that does only state management. Well, maybe dependency injection built in is a plus, but it's not something that I'm looking for. State management is what I am looking for particularly. And I want to also see that these packages are very actively maintained. So I don't want to choose something that tomorrow there will be no support, right? That makes my refactoring a little bit harder later. All right. So this could give me a good idea. So first I categorized, that's good. And the secondly, I could come up with some criteria. You can have different criteria that is based on your business drive and like team drive, right? And also some of your maybe criteria that is important for you yourself as well. It really depends on your application. Then lastly, I said now I need to add some of the architecture characteristic to compare these packages. All right. What I need to do, I need to come up with some words, and then I need to, as I said, translate these words to both business language and developer or team language. Perhaps a good example here is a scalability or adaptability. When I say adaptability, well, it means something for me, but what does it mean for dev, or what does it mean for my PM in the team, product owner, or other business team? So I want to actually convey some of these messages. Say, well, we decide this package, we decide this pattern later. So that is the way I could actually manage this language. I said, okay, when a package has a lot of boilerplate code, whether it has it or not, is it easily to extend? Like we can add more features to it by ourselves? Can we have a very good support from the maintainer, let's say, and etc. Right? Or the repository is active. In terms of business language, maybe merging. Like tomorrow, if my company decided to buy a company and we need to merge two applications, is it easy to quickly adopt this pattern or not? Or if you have another package or application, can we quickly, easily merge these two and extend our application? These are all scalability and extensibility. How about agility? So my team, can they easily adopt and develop and deploy a feature with this with this package? Can they quickly get to the market? So in terms of business language, that means the business owners say, yeah, I want this feature. They don't really care how we architect an application. They care that this feature gets to the market, because at the end of the day, we are building an application that is providing some type of value to the business. And then dev satisfaction, or here in this case, the customer satisfaction. Does the package come with a lot of code generation? Does it help me to probably debug my state management with this package out of the box with some kind of dev tools, or does it have a very good documentation? How about error handling, performance, productivity? These are the terms that you will hear from architect characteristic. Like, is it very testable? Testability. Time and budget. The simpler the package or pattern is, the easier for team to quickly adopt and go and write it, right? So there must be a very good package which comes with a pattern that it takes months to understand. And there are some packages that you don't need to even understand the pattern. It's very built into the Flutter, and then you can be up and running within an hour. So these are simplicity and feasibility. It really depends on what you want to do. And I narrowed down my list to 6 items. And initially it was 7, and I explained why I omitted one of them. So the first one is the built-in features in Flutter. So whatever is in Flutter itself, you have a state full widget with a whole lot other around it that you can use by itself. It's built in, it's great. There is this is a low-level approach, right? It's already built in. And if Flutter is moving forward, new feature comes, new version comes, then you always are sure that you have no dependencies except Flutter. that is perfect. So it's a perfect choice. It's very simple because it comes with a framework. It makes you a little bit productive, but not that productive, because then sometimes it's a little bit of boilerplate that you need to write. Sometimes it's hard to understand what you do. It's a lot of nested things, and maybe passing down and lifting up the state sometimes is a little bit difficult. But it's a perfect choice probably for a firmware state, or maybe for very simple application and prototyping or demos, what you want to do. You don't want to make things complicated. You want to just do it quickly. And a lot of other options, the scalability and maintainability, adaptability, agility, and deployability. These are all have a meaning based on the previous chart or table. And I tried all of them for each of these packages to understand which one is better for my application. It was the original set state or the features from the Flutter made me very agile. Well, adaptability was very high, but in fact, when the application is growing, not very maintainable because it's a little bit difficult. So you need to do a lot of things around the state to get it to work for your big application. Not very scalable. Then I ended up having another solution then. Another one was provider together with change notifier. Okay, perfect choice. So a lot of articles around it, sample codes. I didn't need to even write single line of code with that. I could just read some code, and I actually did. I wrote some code for my application quickly to find out how it's working. And I read some articles very quickly to understand how things work. And then I realized then this is the perfect choice. But I'm going to omit this. The reason is that the author of this package, Remy, has already developed a new package. He also talked to me and said he can also mention the name of the new package, kind of like a provider too. So he encouraged you to kind of choose a new package instead of provider if you are considering that. Therefore, I omitted this. I don't want to choose this, even if that's the best one for me at this package. I don't want to choose it. Therefore, I'm going to go to the next one, which is recommended by the author of provider and is built by author of provider. That is Riverpod. The Riverpod package, well, I gave it a try. That was the first time for this application I was introduced to that. And I wrote some application. I read some code, documentation, so on and so forth. And I understood that, well, it's probably very good and very, very scalable. The way that is architected, the way that is built, that is perfect. It's very testable. I wrote some code, very, very maintainable. That is perfect. It made me a little bit agile, but not as agile as the built-in feature, because it was a little bit of learning curve that I needed to understand. Maybe it's good for some of the application. That most of the application is good, but if especially you have a lot of senior developers, maybe. Then I actually went to another solution. So this was Riverpod. I wrote some code. I added some of these stars to my characteristic. So I went to another one that was Blog. Again, it was very well known in the community, very well maintained. I realized that, this one comes from the reactive programming based category, right? So it's a very good one, especially if you are applying reactive programming pattern in your application. If you have a lot of streams, observables, if you have solutions such as WebSocket, that the data is flowing to your application, coming and going like real time, that might be a perfect choice. So, but I understood that it's a bit of learning curve. Again, here, I needed to understand block as a pattern, as well as the package itself. So it's very highly testable. My team could adapt it very quickly, but because of the learning curve, maybe we couldn't be as agile as possible. There was another option, again, from the reactive programming category. Again, a little bit, that is MobX, a little bit simpler than Block, maybe in the beginning, and very testable. Sometimes I found some glitches, but not a big problem. It made me very productive. It comes with code generation. If you are a big fan of these type of, packages, probably your choice. And that was a good one here. Again, if I had maybe a large application or medium application, and if I had a lot of streams and observables, maybe. So then also my team was not very keen on the code generation itself. Therefore, I went to another one, and that was from functional programming approach, Redux. I said that let's give it a try. Let's go and find out about Redux as a package, as a pattern. I understand, again, if you're not a web developer especially, coming to this package might be a little bit of learning curve. You need to understand how Redux works, how, state is handled, one giant big object, and etc., right? So it can make you a little bit like less agile and less productive in the beginning, at least, and until you pick the whole things and you can write your code. And it comes with a lot of boilerplate codes. Again, if you have a team of web developers, you want to work on Flutter, maybe that is a very good choice for you, because most of the web developers probably are familiar with this pattern and this way of working. All right. And another one, the last package that I chose based on all of those criteria and the categorization that I did was Gedit with Gedit mixing. This was very simpler compared to others. Gedit is a service locator concept for dependency injection together with mixing. To Gedit mixing makes it a very good solution for state management. It's very simple to understand. Sometimes there might be like some testability issues, but it works with many applications, especially if you don't have like reactive patterns, and probably if you don't like dealing with contests and things like that around it in Flutter, maybe it's a good choice also for the application. All right, all of these characteristics, I made the research, I coded for my application quickly, I read documentation, I read some sample codes on GitHub and etc. And this was the final result. Now I have a very good understanding of each of these packages, and I know how all of these, based on my application, my needs, how I could rate them. Now it's time to make a decision. Which one is the best for my application? I have an application that has only a few screens, and I want to get it out within a week or maybe a couple of days. These are the main criteria, and we have just maybe one or two developers, and that's probably it, right? So the most important characteristic to look for was simplicity and agility. We wanted to get these things out very fast. That's why we want something very simple. We didn't want to spend a lot of time to understand how things work. So, based on this criteria, now I could make a decision. And let me know what you think. Which of these, based on these criteria or these characteristics, are the best for my application? And which one do you think I chose? Write in the comment. Maybe I give you 5 seconds. Yes, for some of you who guessed set state or the built-in features in Flutter, that is correct. There is nothing wrong with choosing that for as a state management for my application. So I didn't want to scale that much. The testability of the package, the application was not very important. Just wanted to give things very, very quickly out, and I could come back and maybe refactor it later. Here is the fact. When you are deciding about an estate management, you don't need to look for the best and get an answer from someone else. You look for the needs or the things that you want for your application. You also take into account you have a team the team drives are very important. If the teams are all happy with one package, doesn't matter what it is, then you go for it because it makes you productive and agile. And maybe you will deal with all the other characteristics like maintainability and testability. The project also evolves. In the beginning, you will have a small project. Well, maybe set a state is the perfect choice for me at the beginning. 5 screen and not a lot of states, perfect. But when project is evolving, when you have hundreds of screens and a lot of states to handle, then here is the case. You can simply get rid of that state management and replace it with something else that fits you. There is nothing wrong with that. You can even come up with 2 state management. That's okay. It depends on the application. But the fact here that I want to tell you is architecting your application and separation of concerns is way more important than choosing a state management here, to my opinion. The reason is that, so when you have, for example, a layered architecture, you know that you have a presentation layer, you have an infrastructure like data layer, and you have an application layer, right? You're adding your state management into an application layer. So you don't pollute the rest of your application. You don't pollute your presentation, your widgets. You separate your state management concern into one layer. And then tomorrow, if you want to change that layer and state management with another things, then you can take out that state management and replace it in the same application layer. So your presentation layer, your infrastructure layer will remain the same, hopefully. So here is the fact. Choosing in a state management, it is important for sure, but it's not the only thing and the most important things that you need to go for it. There is also other important factors. For example, a separation of concerns between different layers and having a clear boundaries around your layers that you can later refactor them. And you now know how an architect thinks when they want to choose a solution for a problem. What you learned right now is that you don't need to make a quick and rational decisions. You can just search a bit and have some, criteria, give some rating, discuss with your team, and maybe narrow down your list to 5, 4, couple of solutions and choose one and stick to that until that doesn't work for you. You architect your application. That is good. You made your decision. You moved forward very fast. That is the agile way of working. That is perfect. You're satisfying your business. And at some point, you're coming back. You're fixing your code or your state management that you choose at some times that worked at that time, but now doesn't work. You refactor it with something else, which will work. So now if I ask you a question, what do you think is the best? Which one of these state management out of these 30 is the best state management for your application? I hope that after this talk, I know that you will face 2 boring words. It depends, but at least you can say this and say, yes, I need some time to think about it and choose which one is the best for my application. And what is the best for you, that doesn't mean is the best for me. And there is nothing wrong to go with like a simple solutions such as set a state and the built-in features in Flutter. With that said, thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that it gives you some indications and some tips and tricks about choosing a state management. I know it doesn't come up with a clear answer which one is better, but believe me, it really depends what you want to do. You find my slides and codes in slides.com/myhandler, and you can also find me on internet with this handler everywhere. So happy to answer any question, Evgeny, if there is any. You're muted. Here you go.
Yeah, hopefully you cannot read by the lips because I said some word that I forgot to unmute myself. So thank you very much for your talk. It was a big pleasure. It's always a pleasure to host your talks because they outstanding. They
Thank you very much.
Super nice. And one question, while the audience is warming up. So does it mean your last words were like experimenting and just doing whatever you want, and then you can reevaluate your decisions. Does it actually it cancels all your previous words? Because does it mean that you're just doing something that's suitable for now, and then just go back and change it, and
Yes.
you don't need to think? Yeah.
The fact here is that when you are evaluating like a couple of packages, then you will get a good understanding of them, right? And you may guess that later this one is better, but for now, I have some other characteristic in my application in the beginning. So then I can go with that. The fact here is that for my application, I know that I don't want to scale up. I know that I don't want to test that much. I know that the only thing that is important for me is to get this application out. That because it's a prototype, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that. But if you know in your application that you are growing your screens like very fast, you know that you are growing your code base very fast, and within like 6 months you're gonna have like hundreds of screens and a lot of states, then you probably rate these packages a bit different. For example, for scalability, you give more rating for some packages and less rating to other packages. The fact about understanding these packages, though, it remains, I think, only once you need to understand them. Once you know them, then you just need to keep yourself up to date towards those packages. That's it. So, for example, for me, I've been with Flutter for like the last 4 and 5 years. So I knew many of these packages already when they came out. I know the maintainer of these packages. I used some of them. So for me, it was not very difficult to quickly compare them, right? But maybe for some teams, it is a little bit harder. It takes, in the beginning, it takes more time. But when you spend this time once, then you understand 10 or I don't know, 6 of them very well. The next time when you want to come back and reevaluate, then you don't need to spend that time again. You just need to revisit your decision and go through the criterias and choose based on what you knew already. That's pretty much it. And the fact here is that, yes, I had actually, Evgeny, a situation. So where 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when we started an application, we started with, at that time, scope model, I think, was something recommended by the Flutter team. And it was a lot of talk around it and recommendations. We started using that in our application. Within a month, we realized, that is not actually what we wanted. It's way out of our interest. So that's why we started looking back some of the packages. I gave some, again, ratings, some sample codes, and etc. And then at the end, we ended up using, for example, Block for that application. The reason was that the application was very heavily using WebSockets and real-time data. So choosing Block that time was the best choice for us, So I did it. So I mean, the point here is that for us to taking out the scope model and replacing the block was not very hard as well. The reason was because we had very clear boundary between our widgets and presentation and our data. So it was only one layer to refactor. It took some time for sure. It takes time. I'm not saying it's easy, but it was not very coupled application. It was easier to refactor, let's say.
I see. And one probably last question, because time constraints, and it's kind of broad and like old school people complaining about this young generation. But the question is, do you feel that right now, of course, Flutter is kind of new technology, and it's more than in other technologies, that we are, the amount of tools that we're using, like state managers or libraries, they're growing constantly, and your work as an architecture is not just, imagine you was an architecture, I don't know, 200 years ago. You're thinking about some fundamental things, like your foundation, then your walls, then your rooftop, and that's it. And the same with the application. If you started an application, I don't know, 15 years ago, it was just some patterns, some object-oriented stuff, and yeah, you thought about that. But these days, architecture more of a tools than these fundamental things.
That's a good point. First of all, many of these fundamental things, to be honest, are not quite new. They are pretty old, but some of them are highlighted recently, like maybe in the last 10 years. We're talking about microservices. In fact, microservices was a thing way before we think about it. So, and so to answer your questions, yes, sometimes we get into this rabbit hole of choosing the best tools for solving a problem. And at least as an architect, I understood that we need to quickly realize if we are into the rabbit hole. How do you know you are in the rabbit hole? When you have one and then you go for another tools, and then you find, when you are reading about that one, you find another one, and then you find another one, and then you find another one. Especially, like, let's say if you've been like any JavaScript developer at any time, you can easily get into this rabbit hole, right? So you're looking for like a state management for React, then you find another one, and then you find another one, and then you find another one, and then you see that a week after you are still finding packages. So this is rabbit hole. And the reason that you are probably, at least for me, one of the reasons that you're falling into this trap is because you don't, probably I say it in my on my behalf, I don't have like a clear criteria of choosing what I'm looking for, right? So if I know exactly what I'm looking for, I mentioned in the talk, like, for example, I know I want this package with these criteria. I want a package from this category, and that's it. And if I go looking for that, probably I find 5 of them, not 30 of them. So, or 10 of them. At least the list is shorter and narrower. So it's to me, yes, you're right. Sometimes we are falling into this trap of choosing tools for solving the solutions. But many of these tools are solving sometimes, let's talk about the state management. All of these packages are solving one problem. And the problem is state management, right? So, but we are looking for tools to help us to solve that problem. Whereas the foundation here is you should think how you should manage your state management. And then based on your how, and then you look for a what, like what tools can help me to solve that. So I'm going to solve my state management in this way with these criteria. Then I'm looking for some tools to help me to solve that problem. This is the way probably I think always. And I encourage people to think instead of quickly jump into the right finding the tools, because these are always tools. Tools are supposed to help us, not make our life harder, right? And
that's true. Totally true. Well said, Majid. Well said. And probably would give some time for people to rest and to have some lunch or breakfast, probably,
absolutely.
or maybe even dinner. So thank you very much, Majid. It was a pleasure. Please consider subscribe to Majid's Twitter account and follow him on social networks. It's worth it because he's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.